Hi, I'm E.G. Arcadia Chanda, and I'm from BS in Computer Science second year, and this is my class recording application and the code for it. So first we'll run the program and we'll run through the features of it. First we have here is assign advisor. Now we can assign an advisor here. And then it's now assigned. It's now stored somewhere. Now, you may notice that after we assign an advisor here, it now changes to replace advisor because we already have an advisor for this class. So if we want, we can no longer assign. So we just replace it. So let's say replace I can now just change like a city. Then there, we just change the address. You can also change the first name and last name, but I didn't do that. Next is add student. Now if we go to add student, you can enter the first name, last name, the school ID, and then the student course, which my course is CS, and the address. Then after that, it is saved. So if we display the class list, we can now see that we have the advisor info here, which is correct from what we inputted earlier. And then the students, which in this case we have the student ID, the name, course, and then the address. Now let's say we want to edit the student. Now let's edit that student, which is C in our program. We choose the student ID, and then it shows the student info on what fields are available to be edited. Now here I'll choose the course, which is E, and then now we can input what course we want to change it to, which I'll input BSCS instead of just CS. Now if we display the class list, we can now see that the change has been reflected in here. So for remove student, I'll just quickly add a test case so we'd have multiple students to choose from. And yeah, we won't lose the other for the example, or yeah, whatever. So we now have two students here. Now let's say I want to remove this test case in our records. We can go to this remove student feature. We enter the student ID, and then it shows us the info of the student. So we would be sure that we have selected the correct student. So in this case, it is correct. We are selecting the test case with a student ID of 16. So we confirm it by pressing Y, and then student removed. You can also remove the advisor if we press E, and then advisor successfully removed. So if we display the class list, no advisor info, and then the test case is also gone. Now I'll just quickly assign an advisor again for the next feature. Now if we exit the program and then we run it again, and then we display the class list, you can see that it retains the data from the previous time we run the program. And that is done through a file which is saved here in the code folder, which is here. Advisor, the first name, and then students. Now there's a null here because this is supposed to be for course, but I didn't apply it for advisors, so that would just be null for them, and then for students it would be their course. And then there's a vertical bar here, which is a delimiter, which we use for reading it, which I'll get to later on when we're on that part of the code. So that means that even if we close the program and then we open it, then when we run it and then display the class list, it would still retain it even after closing the program. And yes, that's because of this, the text file that is being saved. That's the program basically. So for the code, there's actually like almost 500 lines. We'll start on our main class, which we have the menu handler. And then here we create a menu handler. Then we call it the display menu. And then the display menu is responsible for this thing here on the output. That's where we go back to every time. That's basically the main menu or something. So once we're on display menu, it reads from the file, which we'll get to that later. But basically it reads the file and then it grabs the advisors and the students. Then we have a while loop in here. First we save, because it's basically an autosave. We don't need to input anything here to save. It would just save every time the user makes changes. So that would be in there. It would save. And then we have here the advisor printout, which is responsible for this one. And there's also an if statement that it checks if there is no advisor, or no, if there is an advisor, if the advisor isn't null. So if it isn't, it's replace advisor, and then it reflects it on this one. So it's either assign advisor or replace advisor. And then the print out basically. Then we have here the choice variable. This is where we enter our choice. Now, we don't really have a scanner for characters. So what we have here is a character variable of choice. And then the scanner here would pick up the first character of whatever string the user would input. So even if we input a lot of characters, it would only read the first one there. So yes, it's F, so it would display that. Anyway, this one's just to consume the new line, because sometimes it does that. Then we have the switch, which basically is where the choice is made. If we have chosen A, we have set advisor, and then that, all of those. So first is, let's go to the first option here, which is assign or replace an advisor, it would be this part of the code. It basically is just a scanner of just everything, and then we make a new advisor with all of the data we've inputted into that. And then after we make a new advisor, we set the advisor for the current section to advisor. Now, the current section, we've actually assigned it here. It's section, current section. That's where we initiate the variable. And it would be this one. And this class contains advisor and then students, which is an array list. So if we call set advisor, we just set the inputted advisor into this advisor, which is the advisor here. Then add student, if we call the add student, it would add it to this array list of student class or object or whatever, which is here. We'll get to that. And then select student, we'll get to that later. And then display student info, display class list. Now for the student, it extends to person. Person basically has the first name, last name, address, and course, which is what we use for both the student and the advisor. And then we also have a method for full name, which just concatenates the first name and the last name string with a space, and then it would return the full name. So yeah, for advisor it's the same. And then we have the method get employee ID, so we could easily get the employee ID. Student, the same, but here you have setter methods, which is used for editing the student info, which we'll get to later. Next, so I think, yeah, that's it for replace advisor. We're now going for add student. For add student, you have the add student info method, which is located here. It's just the same for the advisor info, but this time we request for the student info, and then we create a new student object with all the data we've inputted, and then it adds the student to the current section object, which we use the add student method to add it, which I've already shown earlier. So next is edit student info. For edit student info, we have just the edit student info method. First, it checks if we have students, which I did forget to demo earlier. So if we remove all of our students, as we can see here, it's now empty. If we try to edit student info, it would show that please add students first, because we can't really edit any student if we don't have students. So yes, we don't have to run all this code if there are no students. We just run this, which makes the program, I guess, faster, or it takes less resources. It's the same for remove student. If we remove student, we can see please add students first. We also have that check. And then, yeah, for edit student, we choose the student ID first, then we assign that to the selected ID. Now it's a string because we're open for the possibility of maybe having an ID with letters, which it's actually could be possible in some cases. Haven't seen them in UNC, but could be possible in other cases, I guess. So we're using string. And then after we use the next line, we use the selected student method, which is in the section class. We use this method to find the student with the similar student ID that we've inputted. So this one takes the current section and the selected ID as input. If we go to our selected student class, which is here, or select student class, we have here a for loop, which basically loops through every student. And then for every student, we will check if it's equals to our selected ID, which we've inputted, and then we assign that student to our selected student, and then that's what we return. Now, if this for loop goes through all the students and then it didn't reach the return value, we would have this return statement, which would return if the selected ID does not match any student. So here, student with ID, and then the ID not found. So let's get back to our edit student info. After that, we just check if it did match any student. If it didn't, we just return, because we don't need to run all of this if there was no matching ID. So next is we display the student info here. I've shown it earlier, I think. So once we show it, we would now ask the user which field they'd want to edit. So we have the same character scanner, and then we have a switch, which is basically just all of the student info. Similar to this one, add student info, but in this case, it's just one of them, depending on which we inputted. Next, after added student info is remove student, which is this method. Now, for remove student info, we first check if we have students, as I've shown earlier. Then we enter the student ID. We select the student using the select student method, similar to the edit student info. Then we return if it's null. We didn't find any similar student to the ID. We display the student info, which we just use the same method for the edit student info, display student info method. And then the confirmation, if you want to remove the student, then the case of Y and N. We also have this character to uppercase, so that whatever they input, it will be the uppercase version. So if they input the small y, it would still count on this, it would still run this. After that is remove advisor. For remove advisor, we also check if there is an advisor, similar to us checking if there are students. Then if this is false, we can continue here. We just set the advisor to null, and then advisor successfully removed. Files, I think we don't need this. I just forgot to remove it. Also, I think I'll comment this code later. And then next is display class list, which we just call the display class list from a different class. And then check students. This is what we use to check students for the edit student and remove student. It's just I'll check if the array list is empty. If it is, please add student first. We return false, and then if it's not empty, we return true. And then this one is for our exit program method here, exit program. Now, that's all for the class recording app. For the files part of the app, we have here save to file writer. We clear, because if we don't clear it, the program basically just duplicates the student every time it reads from the file. So like, let's say there's 2 students here, and then if we close it and then we open it again, or we display the class list, there would now be 4 students here, and it's just a duplicate of the 2, which is not what we want. So we clear the contents first. We also have here false on the file writer, which means we don't append, we replace it or something. Then here, this is the file writer for our advisor, and then this one would be for the student. We close it. We close the writer after that. Then the read file, this is responsible for reading the data from the file that we have saved. So we can actually just retrieve the data even if we close the application. So we check if the file exists. If it doesn't, it just skips that. It skips all of that. And then we have a while loop in here, which is, it just loops every time there's still a line. So here, this one is responsible for the advisor data. First is we split the information with the delimiter that we chose, which we chose this vertical bar here. That's our delimiter. That's the use of that. And then after that, we now grab each information, then we assign it to their respective variable, like first name, last name, address. Then we create an advisor object. We input all those data, and then we set the advisor with the set advisor method, similar to the assign advisor here. And then here we have an else if, which if it's not the advisor, it's gonna be the else if student. Now we have this one here because if we don't have students, I think it puts in the file like exclamation mark students. Or if that's old, I don't know, forgot. Basically, similar here. It parses it with the delimiter, and then we assign the variables, new student, and then all the data, and then we add the student, and then that's it. So yes, that's basically all of the program and its features and all of its code explained. Thank you for listening.